Watch. Hey, we're back here with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm going to talk about the, well, kind of the distressing news coming out of the Supreme Court.
Yes.
For just the last week alone has been insane. I remember we were covering the hearings on Thursday night. We were talking about it here, and I went, oh my God, there's so much to talk about in the hearings. We don't have a chance to talk about the fact that the Supreme Court has thrown out a 109-year-old New York gun law that has stood among Democratic administrations, Republican administrations, but they've tossed it out and are ready to turn the city into a shooting gallery. We haven't talked about that. Today, we haven't even talked about the fact that yesterday they brought prayer back into the schools. The fact that last week they said if a county or city does not Mirandize you, you can't sue them about it. And of course, on Friday, they overturned both Casey and Roe v. Wade. What is your reaction to what you're hearing from the Supreme Court?
Well, I think one of the things that we're seeing here is the Supreme Court is actively delegitimizing itself. And what we have...
When you mean delegitimize, and I want to hear the rest of the answer, but
yeah.
I hear that word delegitimize, and certainly in Casey, they actually were worried that they would lose legitimacy in the court. They'd do irreparable damage to the court.
Yes.
What do you mean when you say delegitimize?
So what that means is that the Supreme Court has a power, but its power is in whether its rulings are heeded and respected, and if so, how much and to what extent. And when we have the framing of, the framing of our government, the presidency, Congress, the president, Congress, and the Supreme Court are supposed to be three co-equal branches. Co-equal, none with supremacy over the other. And when any one of those branches overreaches its authority, it is the responsibility of the other two to check the overreach of that authority. The Supreme Court has engaged in the overreaching of its authority in denying the human and civil rights of any pregnant person or person that could become pregnant in the United States of America. They have engaged in overreach, and it is the responsibility of the president and Congress to put the Supreme Court in check because they have delegitimized themselves.
What actions, would you like to see from your fellow lawmakers? Because the court's response to that might be, Alito specifically says, return this to the elected representatives of the people. He believes that that's where legitimacy, at least the issues of Roe, of abortion, should be returned to the people. What action would you like to see the Congress take?
Well, I think history really informs a lot, and it gives us lessons here, because this is not the first time that this has happened. In the 1800s, the Supreme Court was taken over by the Confederate South and was starting to rule in ways that limited Abraham Lincoln, for example. In the Dred Scott ruling, they ruled that Black Americans are not and can never be full citizens of the United States. And what did Abraham Lincoln do? He signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He ignored the gross overreach and abuse of power during Franklin Delano Roosevelt's attempt to restore the country during the Great Depression with the Green New Deal. I mean, not the Green New Deal, the New Deal. The New Deal.
Yes.
Anyways, with the New Deal, what we saw was an overreach from the Supreme Court attempting to prevent us from passing these laws. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt threatened to expand the court. And in his adoption of that position, despite the fact that Congress didn't do it at that time, although Lincoln did, the fear of the court's power being minimized caused them to back off their overreach and abuse of power. I believe that President Biden should entertain expansion of the Supreme Court. I believe that he should forcefully come out in ending the filibuster of the United States Senate. I believe that he should call on Congress to repeal the Hyde Amendment. And I also believe that Congress, we have the possibility, when we are strengthened by the repeal of the filibuster, or even the change to a talking filibuster or a standing filibuster, in doing so, we can codify Roe, we can codify, and all of the other cases that the Supreme Court indicated that they would threaten. We can codify same-sex marriage. We can codify the right to contraception. We can codify interracial marriage. We can do it. But we can only do it. We can only do it if we're not fighting with one hand tied behind our back, let alone two. And so I think that right now, we just need a fight. We need a fight. And we need to show and demonstrate to the American people that then when they vote to give Democrats power, we will use it to the fullest extent possible to defend everybody's civil, economic, and human rights. Yeah.
Because certainly the Republicans use it to the fullest extent of their power.
Yes.
At all times. Well, we have to take a quick break, but we're right back with more Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, everybody. Stick around.